this fashion show, whatever city they are in. So wherever the Super Bowl, like next year, it's going to be in Arizona. They will pick. Hi, how are you? I cut my
Good. How
chin
you
off.
doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing good. I really appreciate you for taking time on being on my show.
Of course, of course. This is what I love to do. I love getting stories out and, sharing inspiration. So I am happy to be here.
Definitely, I'm excited. So, for the people on my platform that don't know, can you tell them a little bit about your brand and what you do?
Yes. So my name is Juliet Hahn, and I am the creator of a podcast called Your Next Stop. And from there, I have two live shows. So I do live shows on Fireside. It's Mark Cuban and Fallon Fatim's new app. If you have not checked it out, definitely go check it out because I have two series over there. One is YNS Live, and that is my podcast. I really interview people that have followed a passion and turned it into a business. When I first started, it was mainly women because it was where I was. I'm a mom. I have teenagers now, and as my kids were growing, I needed to kind of fulfill other things. They didn't need me as much, and I'm kind of like one of those go-getters. I just don't sit around and eat bombs, and I don't like housework. So I was like, let me figure out what I can do so I don't have to do the laundry as much. And so I created these shows. So the other show that I have on Fireside is called YNS Live with NFL Thread. And NFL Thread is it's almost like the LinkedIn to the women of the NFL. So it's the spouses of the NFL. And how that kind of came about is on Your Next Stop, I was interviewing Cynthia Zordich, who her husband is Michael Zordich, who has been in the league for over 12 years. And she started talking, and it really started getting me think as a mom, as a woman, as a wife, as someone that has passions and, has wanted to pursue myself. I'm just, again, not someone that sits around. I thought, wait a second. So if my husband was in the league and every couple years we had to pick up and move to a different city, what would that look like for me? And what does that do for your mindset? So Cynthia and I started this whole segment called YNS Live, like Your Next Stop Live with NFL Thread. And we interview women that are part of the NFL, whether, they are in the league, whether they've retired. And it's a really cool segment because we just came back from LA. So I was at the Super Bowl doing my live show, actually live. I had an agency that helped me set everything up. It was fascinating. But a lot of people don't realize that Thursday and Friday before the Super Bowl, there's two huge events that the women put on, but they don't really talk about it because they're just a really humble group of women that are just like, oh, well, we do what we have to do, but they always are raising money for charity. So on Thursday, YNS Live was live at the NFL Thread networking event. And it really just keeps the women together. So Cynthia's idea was, after the women leave the league, let's stay together because they're such a sisterhood. Let's support each other as we grow. And then also to help the young, girls that are coming in that they maybe, don't know, okay, if my husband gets hurt next year, what are we going to do? And so it's a really, really awesome networking event. They do it every Thursday. And then on Friday, there's a fashion show that's actually been going on for 21 years and no
Wow.
one knows about it. And it makes me crazy because what happens is it's called Off the Field Wives Association. And it is their 501(c). Again, these are very humble women that just is like, this is what we do, but they don't really talk about it that much because they all have businesses. A lot of them have brands. A lot of them are doing other things, behind the scenes that are just not, they don't feel like, it's something that needs to be broadcasted. But I was like, we need to broadcast this because this is something that's amazing. So what they do is they have this fashion show whatever city they are in. So wherever the Super Bowl, like next year, it's going to be in Arizona, they will pick a charity that the proceeds go to. So again, for 21 years, this last one was Holly Rod, which is Holly Robinson Pete and Rodney's foundation, which is supports autism and Parkinson's. And it was really cool to be there. First of all, it was like one of the first big events I feel like that everyone went back to, right? It was like, okay, we all don't have to wear masks. We don't have to, we could all be close to each other. So the love energy, that's what I kept saying, the love energy that was there was just incredible. So I got to broadcast live from that event as well. I was on the red carpet. I got to meet all these amazing people. And I was just in my element. So I guess that was a very long story to tell you what I'm about. But I'm also a mom. I have 3 kids. They're my heart. I have 2 boxers, and I have a husband that, family is everything to me.
You're a go-getter. That's a lot.
Yeah, I am a goal getter. Good. My biggest, and I shouldn't say biggest fear, because when I say that, if I really think of like other things, but is really to be bored, just to like have nothing to do. And I would never allow that to happen, because I'm someone that always creates. I'm someone that always will create things, whether it's in my mind, whether it's just around. I'm someone, that will just kind of always have my hands in a lot of different things, because I am passionate about things. And I think it's important for women and moms, especially, but also men that are like in a job that they don't like why stay there? Just even if you're making a lot of money, or you're not making a lot of money, or you feel like you have to stay in that area, you really don't. If you really think about it, like, we're not trees. We're not grounded where you can't move. So I am someone that really, really believes in that. If you're going to live the best life, you really need to, kind of tap into your creative passion and really think about things to do. And one of the big things that I always will say to people is, you need to find that space to daydream. And daydreaming to me, is a positive thing. In school, yes, they don't daydream, there's a kid daydreaming. But when you daydream, you can really create the life that you want. And when you start doing that, it really changes your whole mindset.
Right. It's a good thing.
Yes, it's a very good thing.
Now you said you was broadcasting live at the Super Bowl, having a podcast. How was that?
It was amazing. It was amazing. When I first had the opportunity arise, I was like, okay, I can do this. I know how to broadcast live. I do it from my house. Fireside is a great platform to be able to do that. I see some Fireside people have joined the show right now. But what it is, it's a really, you can stream to other platforms. So like it's almost like this, but it's like an auditorium. So like you're in a room where you're on stage, there's people in the audience, people can talk. It's actually a really like awesome feel. But so I was thinking to myself, oh, I can totally do that. That's like not a hard thing. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, wait, if I'm going to be in front of the camera, I need to really dive into this. So I went back to other people that I've had on my podcast that I know have had experience with this, started talking, created partnerships, actually got some really good sponsors, which was really exciting. So I was able to do it in an awesome fashion. So I was able to have this agency. It's called MRN Agency. They're in LA. If you guys need any kind of live event stuff, they are the best. And they set up this whole amazing thing. So, I had a whole podcast studio where, everyone was networking and people were jumping on and just sharing their story. My big thing is, what are you doing at the Super Bowl? A lot of the people don't even go to the game, because that's like not what they're doing. They're there to network. They're there to socialize. They're there to raise money for charity. So I wanted to tap into that and find out. So the podcast had, everyone. There's also players that come to the networking event, which is really cool, because again, they need to think outside of the box. Like, if you think about, you played flag football for your whole life, right? And then all of a sudden you become a professional football player. Maybe that's a goal, a dream, or you're just that talented. And then you get hurt and you have no backup plan. They need to really think about this. So that's what this NFL thread really wants to be there to be, like, teaching and helping this, the group just be like, okay, here's the next thing. So it was insane. And then being on the red carpet was, it was really a dream. And it was funny because I thought, okay, I'm going to probably have some nerves because I don't know a lot. I'll know faces, but I don't know the names, and I'm not going to be like whispering to people, what is that person's name? I'm just going to wing it. And I was in my element. And if anyone that's listening, or if you've been there where you just are in your element, you're not nervous, you just like, it was amazing. It was literally like a dream come true. And it was just so fun to get into the heads of like finding out. And the thing that I loved is when a lot of the wives were walking down the carpet, there was so many people that were honored for different things. And then people that were walking in the fashion show. A lot of the players' wives were walking the fashion show, and a lot of the players would like stand behind their wives as I was interviewing them. And I would say, oh, come up. And they're like, this is her day. And I just thought it was such a special thing. And we as society don't always get to see that. We always think, okay, this is what an NFL player is. This is what their life is about. And it's so different. And so that's really one of the reasons why I wanted to get this show out there, is because I wanted people to see a different side. Like, they're humans just like us. They just have a talent that not all of us have.
Right. As far as like your brand, is it just you, or you have a team with you?
So I have a team. I have an executive producer, and I have someone that helps me with editing. We have a small team. I have an intern. We are, we're a growing brand. I mean, we really have been doing some great things. And one of the things that if you've listened to my podcast, or if you've been around me, or know me, is I truly believe we all have a path, whether it's God or the universe that you believe in. A lot of people don't find their path because they don't allow themselves to do that. Daydreaming is what that's really what I'm referring to. But as I started this, I really started it as a passion project. I was doing health and fitness coaching, and I was teaching classes, and it just wasn't doing the same thing for anymore. When my kids were little, it was great because I was able to go get a sitter, teach a class, and kind of get myself in shape, but also bring a little money in, which was nice because I stopped working after I started having kids per choice, because I always wanted to be stay home with my mom, with my kids, and be a stay-at-home mom. And so I was very fortunate that I was able to do that, that my husband has a successful job. And so, but as my kids grew and they didn't need me as much, and I was doing a lot of volunteer stuff. I did a lot of stuff in the town. I did a lot of stuff with Adopt a Boxer Rescue. I did stuff in the school. There was just something that I wanted more. And so doing that daydream and kind of like going into this. So as I started this, I had people reach out and being like, okay, you really have some good ideas. Like, can I help you? So I've had people very fortunate do that. They're obviously on salary, and I'm fortunate that I'm able to do that as well. But it's hard work, but it's really not giving up, and it's being consistent, and it's taking those steps every day. Every day I work. I do on the weekends take a little time because my kids are all into athlete. They're all athletes, so we're traveling everywhere. But they know I need to stay, whether it's social media or whether it's, on top of getting stuff out. It is one of those things that it's a balance that we all, as entrepreneurs have to work on. But it is something that my kids know that I dreamed this in my mind and I've made it happen. And it doesn't matter what age you are. I'm 48 years old. This is my path now. My path when I was a mom was that path. When I was a health and fitness coach was that path. When I was in advertising was that path. So my thing to, really talk about, and especially on my podcast, is the whole aspect of storytelling, being able to share your story and be able to tell your story. And a lot of people will be like, yeah, I know my story. But when they go to tell it, they don't think about like those times. So this is what I'll also tell some of my clients. I have clients that I also help with this, is you sit and think about the times that you were little. Yes, some of us did not have the best, upbringing, and maybe there's some painful things, but there's going to be a few moments in your life that you never forget. One for me is I'm dyslexic. So, and I grew up in a town that, there was not a lot of people that struggled. Everyone was good at everything. And my family's dyslexic. So my dad, my sister. So, but we praised it. It was like, okay, you learn different, but here. But I remember very vividly in fourth grade realizing, oh, wait, I learned different. And it was because of the entire class, all my really good friends went to gifted and talented, and I went to special reading with this one kid that was actually the troublemaker in the class, but he was an awesome kid. But they didn't understand. I didn't get into trouble. My mom she was a teacher in the district, so I knew I'd get in big trouble if I ever acted out in class. But I remember sitting there a lot of times and being like, why does everyone seem like they understand what the teacher's saying? Like, I would get the first two steps, but it was like the third, fourth, fifth step, I'd be like, ugh, I couldn't connect it. So I had a lot of things that I had to overcome. I did go to college. I played two sports, but I realized very early that what my strengths and weaknesses were. And communications was a strength of mine. So I could talk to the teachers. I knew that I would get their attention when I talked to them. But I realized when I had to put anything on paper is when I got the negative feedback. Oh, you're not trying. You're not working hard enough. You're goofing off. And I was really trying. It just, when you're dyslexic, what's in your brain does not go on a piece of paper, especially when you can't spell and all these things. So I had to make a lot of changes. But all of those changes and all of those things that maybe stung when I was little really developed me into who I am, and really brought me to a place where I'm fearless. So I don't care if I fail. I don't care if I look silly, if you're stupid, because there's so many times in school where I would ask a question where the teacher would be like, oh, come on, you know that answer. And it was like, well, no, I'm asking the question because I actually don't. Thank you for making me feel like an ass. I appreciate it.
Right.
And I obviously didn't say that to them, but that's what I would internalize. again, I am a confident human. I, had a very supportive upbringing. So that was all good. And I had a lot of friends. I played sports. So I knew where my strengths were, but I also did know where my weaknesses were. And I knew, at times where I had to kind of pivot and figure it out. So when you learn that way and things, when you struggle, you kind of figure things out. And as life goes, I've interviewed for jobs that I had no business interviewing for because I was not qualified, and I would get them. But then once I was in it, it'd be like, oh crap, okay. So I do a lot of stuff like that. I'm really a type of person that, and I always say this, this saying wrong, but I build the plane as I'm flying it. That's what it is. So I do that. That's my whole life. Like I will have an idea and I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. But it is because of my story. So that's really like what I want your listeners and people to think about. Think about those moments in your life. And then what I do and what I do really, really well is when I have a guest, there's been time and time again where they've come on, like on the show, and they've started talking about their story, and I've helped them connect their dots, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that moment actually really defined a lot of what's going, so it's fun. I love what I'm doing. I really do. And this is my path. This is what God really created me to do in this time in my life.
And that's dope. And you're doing real good at it, doing a lot.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
So where can everybody find like your podcast and all your shows?
Yep. So it's Your Next Stop, which is, just YOUR next and STOP. You can find that on every single one of the podcast players. I don't think there's one that we're not on. You can also go to my website, which is I am Juliet Hahn. And so you can go there. You can also see the other things that I'm doing, the partnerships, I have an online course that I teach, and it's really to help people find that creative passion, because as I was building this, I was like, I need to help people be able to do this. So I kind of made this whole course for people to be able to do. And you can find me on all the socials. I am Juliet Hahn, and it's Juliet, Juliet, Hahn, Hahn. And I'm happy, when you asked me to join you, I feel like we connected a long time ago, and then I had a lot of different things, but I said, I promise you I'll come on and do live. Because the other thing is I love supporting other people that are following their passion and jumping on and doing things like that. So if people are out there that are, hey, do you mind doing it? If I have the time, and a lot of times I will make the time, I will 100% support, because it's important that we support each other. It's important that we all kind of, and that's one of my favorite things when I, have a guest on my podcast. It's a lot of times I think of all the people I can connect them with, and then put them together, because that's what the world should be about. It should be about us supporting each other. Everyone, has a space in this world. If we all just kind of opened our minds and opened our hearts, we would really be a better place.
Right. For any upcoming podcaster, is there any advice you could give, like to help them get like downloads and just put themselves out there?
Yeah. I mean, so really what I always say to, someone when they first start their podcast, there's a lot of different steps before that, and I'm happy to talk about that as well. But when you're on it, a lot of things what we do is I have my admin, and what I'll have a guest on, and what we do is we'll connect with their followers. So like in LinkedIn, for instance, if we're connected with the same sort of people, we'll just say, hey, I had X, Y, and Z on the podcast. You might want to listen to their story. Also encouraging your guest to also share, because a lot of times on my podcast, a lot of the guests have never told their story in the way that I formulate, because I ask really curious questions. It's more of a conversation. I don't do a lot of research on my guests, because I want to be surprised. I want to be able to just come up with those curious questions. Now, that's not for everyone. There's a lot of people that need to do a lot of work to feel comfortable to be able to have, the person on, because they want to be able to talk to certain things. For me, if I had notes in front of me, because I'm dyslexic, it's like torturous. Like I will like lose my focus. So for me, it is just a very natural thing. Yes, I've gotten better as I've continued to podcast and do all these things. So practice, and just really, wherever you are, talk about it. Like in the grocery line, on the kids pickup, when people ask what you do, I'm a podcaster. This is my show. Hey, you might be interested. Really go through the socials. This is where people will say like social media, like they have negative things. I think social media is great if you use it to your advantage. So I will constantly, contact people. I will constantly support people on their, podcast, on their pages and stuff. So that's the other thing. If you have someone that you want to have a guest on and you ask them and then that you don't hear from them, go to their page, start commenting. There's like a bell that you can click you will get a notification that that person just posted, because then they say, oh, wait, they're interested in me. It's not just like checking a notch. This whole world is about relationships, and people want to feel like, okay, there's a reason for it. It's not just because they want me on because I have a name, or they don't want me on because of this. You really have to engage and interact with that person. And whether it's their page, whether it's an email, that is one of my things. If I find something that I love and I really believe in, I will talk about it all the time, and they don't have to be a sponsor of mine. I do have sponsors, but it's just one of those things. If you just kind of are authentic and open your heart and really just talk about what you're doing, and it's not, don't be like shy about it, the more people are going to be like, oh wow. And then that's like, it's really an organic thing. I have to say with podcasting, I mean, it's organic mostly of how I really grew. But then as I grew, it was, okay, like I don't do any advertising. I don't spend any advertising dollars. We'll do some sponsors on Instagram, but that has nothing to do with my podcast. Like if you want to get podcast listeners and you do have a budget, you can go into certain podcast players and advertise. However, I've never done it. That's not my thing, but I will boost a couple posts on Instagram. That's just to, increase there. But you also don't have to do that. It's just really making those connections and keeping those relationships open. It's like, don't just be like, okay, that person was on my podcast. Now you forget about them and you don't really go back, and because they're going to recommend people like, hey, I really had a great time with this person on this podcast. I mean, one of the things that we do is after the podcast is recorded or after a live podcast, my admin gets a quote. And then my show goes out Monday and Thursdays. And again, even the live shows, even though you can catch them on all live platforms, they do go to my RSS feed every Thursday. So my live shows, the YNS Live or YNS Live with NFL Thread, that goes out on Thursdays. Your Next Stop goes out on Mondays. And Your Next Stops are usually just a little bit of a shorter show, and they're pre-recorded. But there's not a lot of editing because it's a conversation. I like to have conversations. I don't like things cut out, because if a person has the way they talk, if someone's cutting things out, it's not natural. So that's the way my show goes. But so we put out a quote from the guest, and then again, probably 2 weeks later, we also then put out a little snippet video, and the little video goes out. So that again is boost the show again. I will go through and I do this. I go through all my socials. So the morning they hit, I go to Spotify, I go to Apple, I put them in my stories. I talk about it. If I do have the organization, some days I'm able to do stories before, just to get people excited what you're doing. So, and not every one of your shows is going to have the same numbers. That's another thing. Like if you're constantly looking at your downloads, don't do it. Like, when people say, like, when you're trying to lose weight, don't step on the scale all the time. You don't want to get discouraged. If you're loving what you're doing, and you're consistent and you keep at it, it's going to grow organically. And that's the biggest thing. People think, oh, they're going to jump in. Oh, wait, no one's listening. Well, you need to talk about it. You need to do the work behind the scenes, but then you also need to be consistent and keep doing it. Because if all of a sudden you get, kind of discouraged because you're like, oh, no one's listening, it's because you're like, are you talking about it? Are you sharing it? In the first couple, you'll have your family members. Sometimes, I mean, I have to say, my family members, some of them listen, but not all of them, because it's not their cup of tea. And that's okay. I don't get offended by it. I don't think my kids and my husband's listened to a couple. If I'm like, hey, can you listen to that one? I just would love your perspective. But he's not my target audience. So that's the other thing. Like, think about your target audience, and you kind of always want to stay and talk to them. There's going to be times that maybe you have an opportunity to have a guest on that's maybe a little out of your target audience. There's nothing wrong with that, but don't, kind of zigzag all the time, because you're going to lose those people. If you're consistent and you're really talking to that same audience, you're going to grow organically.
Okay. Good advice. Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. I really appreciate you for being on my show.
Yes, no, thank you so much for having me. And again, anyone that has questions, I'm happy to answer questions. And this is you just keep doing what you're doing because you're consistent. Why don't you tell people, I mean, because I know there's some of my followers on here right now. When do you do your lives?
My lives are every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time,
Yeah,
and
and so yeah, go ahead.
I also have news updates that I do with Len Bestoff from NBC Connecticut.
That's great. That's great. And how did you get into doing this, if you don't mind me asking?
I went to school for it.
You did.
Yeah,
Okay, so it was a passion of yours from early on.
yeah.
That's awesome. And that's awesome. And that's the thing, just being consistent and getting it out. And people will then be like, oh, wait, I have this because that's the other thing. And then I'll go. I could talk for hours, obviously. When when you first go out there and you talk to someone, I always tell my clients or my, people listening to the podcast or the people that I'm talking to, if you hear something once, do you actually take action at it? A lot of times we don't because we're busy, right? The world is busy. So what I say is if you can constantly talk about it, and you're touching someone 8, 9, 10, 11 times is when they're more apt to be like, oh my gosh, okay, I've seen this person's podcast 1,000 times. I need to jump in and listen. Now, they might listen and never come back. But that's what you need to do. And that's where the consistency is so, so important because that's where, again, if you're touching that person all those times and social media, it's hard because of the algorithms and all those things. So that's where you need to cultivate the relationships and continue to, have them.
Thank you. Good advice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Definitely really appreciate it.
Yes, no worries. And happy Tuesday.
Thank you. Happy Tuesday. Maybe we could do this again.